everybody. Welcome to the R Plus Canine Podcast. I am your host, Connie Moss, and today we're talking about reactivity in dogs. Man, I love this subject. This one's near and dear to my heart. In fact, when I was writing my notes out for this podcast, I had just had so much written down. I really had trouble paring this down, you guys. There's so much I like to talk about here. But we're going to try to stick to the main points, and I'm going to give you some simple, practical tips and strategies for handling your reactive dog. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I want to tell you, what is dog reactivity? It is an overreaction to normal stimuli. So a dog would be overreacting. And the stimuli, we call them triggers, could be other dogs or people or noises. So often this overreaction is rooted, or the emotion that underlies it is rooted in fear and anxiety, but it could also be about frustration or insecurities, not necessarily about aggression. So I think it's really important to differentiate between reactivity and aggression. Reactivity is an overreaction to seeing a trigger. Aggression is very clear that the dog is determined to cause very serious harm or to maim or to kill the trigger. So you've seen that, I'm sure, either on social media or on television. A dog is heading in. They are determined to cause very serious harm and stop that trigger. Whereas reactivity, a dog may bark and lunge toward the trigger, but they're not intending to engage it. They're intending to push it away, move the trigger away from them, because for whatever reason, fear, anxiety, frustration, insecurity, they just don't want the trigger around them. So it's important to understand that there are differences between aggression and reactivity. Now, having said that, any dog who is reactive can be pushed into aggression. So that's why it's important to deal with reactivity. Common signs of reactivity: lunging, barking, growling, snapping. Those are the big signs, the things that we all see and that we all know. Oh, yep, that dog's being reactive. And the lesser known signs, these are the precursors, the subtle signs that something is coming, is something like pacing, whining, lip licking, whale eye. And whale eye just means the whites of their eyes are showing. So those are all much more subtle, but those are indicators that your dog is uncomfortable. And if you continue with what you're doing, your dog may be forced to yell. And that is lunging, barking, and growling and snapping. And a lesser obvious signal, I should say, is freezing or trying to escape. So reactive dogs aren't always big and boisterous and outgoing about it. Sometimes they freeze. Sometimes they tuck their tail, they lower their head. They want to get out of there. So that is another sign of reactivity. Common triggers or stimuli for reactive dogs. Other dogs, we're going to talk in this podcast specifically about other dogs, but remember, it can be towards people, strangers, children, maybe specific types of people, maybe people wearing hats or people with umbrellas, maybe men. It could be moving objects, cars, bikes, skateboards. It could be noises. Sirens can even be another one. So when we talk about reactivity, and when you work with a trainer, and myself included, trainers, we usually take a two-pronged approach to this. So there's the management strategies, and then there's the training strategies. Management is key to fixing reactivity. If you don't have management, it will never be fixed. You'll never get it, no matter how much training you do. So think of it like this. If you have an old behavior that you want to change, you first have to stop it from happening, and then you can replace it with a new behavior. That's the best way to do this with reactivity training for dogs. So in order to stop the old behavior, we need to manage the dog and prevent them from practicing the wrong thing, right? Because the more they practice the wrong behavior, the stronger it becomes, which will, of course, make it a little bit harder to fix. So there are three key categories I look at in management. environmental management, understanding the body language of the dog in a trigger situation, and safe exercising. So if you've worked with me, you've probably heard me talk about all these things many times. Environmental management. I'm going to ask you to avoid running into your triggers, your dog's triggers, whenever you can. This is not failure. This is not distracting the dog. This is stopping old behavior cold turkey so that we can then do the training to teach a new behavior. So you want to avoid your dog from running into their triggers whenever you can. So you want to manage the home environment as well, because that's a part of it. If a dog is looking out the window every day and barking at other dogs that walk by, that is going to have an impact on your dog's reactivity when you're out walking your dog on leash in a park somewhere. So as a trainer, we may ask you to put up window coverings. The window film, you can buy that at home improvement stores. We may ask you to temporarily move your furniture around so your dog cannot see out the window. Basically prevent them from looking out the window. We may ask you to do sound dampening. So there may be, play music in the background when you're at work during the day so your dog can't hear other dogs barking, or at least lessen the sound of the barking. And these will help prevent your dog from practicing the wrong behavior. And then we're going to talk about, as a part of environmental management, leash skills and equipment. So one really good leash skill is a short but loose leash. So think about that. A short leash that is not tight. You want a short leash, especially when you're dealing with triggers around your dog, even in the training process, because you want your dog next to you. That's important for many reasons. One, because your dog out in front of you, your dog may feel a little bit more alone and will be likely to take matters into their own hands. Or if your dog's next to you, they can't misbehave as easily. And you can also deliver the treats or the reinforcements quickly because the dog's next to you. And also, that leash needs to be soft and loose, even though it's short. We don't want you to have a tight leash, because a tight leash conveys tension to the dog, and you will get a tense dog as a result. So we want a short but soft leash. Often we're going to ask you to use a front clip harness or a head halter. This is going to give you better control over your dog, and also it's less likely that your dog will be pulling if the leash is attached to the front of the harness instead of the back of the harness. We're also going to ask you to avoid retractable leashes. And my own personal feeling is you shouldn't be using them anyway, unless you meet certain criteria. And I'm okay with them under certain situations, but this is not one of them. So no on the retractable leashes when you're dealing with your reactive dog. Another part of the management is understanding your dog's body language in a trigger situation. So we're going to learn to recognize the early warning signs before the full reaction actually happens in your dog. So they were the things that I mentioned earlier: whining, pacing, lip licking. Maybe your dog's stance is more forward. Maybe your dog actually stops first and their ears prick up and there are forehead wrinkles when they see their trigger. So those are things that we want you to be able to recognize quickly and easily so that you can avoid this situation as soon as possible. And these are the early warning signs that something bigger is coming if you don't take action. All right, and we are talking about management right now, so these are important to help you avoid the trigger so you can stop the old behavior from happening. And when you know the early warning signs of your dog's signals, you can then create distance as soon as possible and avoid the unpleasant situation altogether. Last part of management is the ability to exercise your dog safely. So we may ask you to use sniff spots. We may ask you to scout out routes and times of the day when you're not going to run into the trigger. We may teach you how to use visual barriers like cars and bushes to create distance between your dog and a trigger. And I love that. I use it all the time with my clients. I call it blocking. just means that if you see the trigger coming before your dog sees it, no problem. You're able to block behind a car. You might even throw out a handful of treats into the grass, and your dog can happily snuffle in the grass while the trigger is passing by on the other side of the street. Once it's gone, you continue your walk. Having a bailout plan, that's really important if you're walking your dog or exercising your dog and you're practicing management, because sometimes triggers appear suddenly. So you need a bailout. Usually that's a U-turn. You want to teach your dog how to do a really fast and easy U-turn. You want to know where you are on your walk. Do you have options? Can you block your dog? Can you turn down another road? Can you get away quickly to avoid having to come too close to the trigger? That's really important. And you want to have high-value treats for redirection. In management, that is key. So when you're dealing with big emotions, you need to bring out the big guns. I'm thinking like boiled chicken or boiled hamburger patties chopped up, maybe freeze-dried liver, something, freeze-dried salmon, something really delicious. Canned chicken, that's a good one. It's really smelly. Dogs love it. And we're not asking for high-value treats to distract the dog. We are asking you to use them to redirect your dog. So, for example, if you're blocking or U-turning or otherwise getting out of there, bailing out fast, the high-value treats are very helpful in getting your dog's compliance under the management situations. And we don't really want to distract our dogs from the triggers, because when you're doing the training portion, you're going to be purposely engaging the triggers. But in management, we want to avoid the old behavior from happening. So just remember, management's all about avoiding the wrong behavior or the old behavior, and we must stop it in order to replace it with new behavior. I know, I'm saying it a lot, I know, because it's really important. Okay. Now let's look at the other part of this approach that trainers will use, and that is the actual training. We've talked about the management. You've got good management in place. You're avoiding triggers. Now let's teach the new behavior. So this is where this podcast will probably get just a little bit controversial, because I do have feelings, and I'll explain those to you, about why you should be choosing positive reinforcement specifically for this kind of training. So it's going to build a positive association with the triggers, and that's really important. What your dog experiences or feels when they see the trigger, when they experience the trigger, is what the dog will pair with the trigger. Okay, so just think about that. Think about that idea. If I'm giving my dog really good food, boiled hamburger patties, and my dog loves those things, every time they see the trigger, my dog's going to start having really nice feelings about that trigger. If I pair a shock with the trigger, then my dog is going to associate pain or something uncomfortable with the trigger. And that's not such a good feeling. And I'll explain why in a minute. So you want to use the positive associations for your trigger. You want to use counter conditioning and desensitization. And just in a nutshell, counter conditioning just means that your dog has not so nice feelings about the trigger, and we're going to change those feelings to good feelings. So we're changing the dog's feelings about something. That's counter conditioning. Desensitization, well, that just comes along for the ride. If we're doing this correctly, your dog is desensitizing to the trigger as well. They're getting constant low intensity exposure, and we know that it's desensitizing because over a period of time, weeks or months, the dog's reaction to the trigger is less and less. Now keep in mind, if you're not doing it right, you end up sensitizing the dog. And you know that that's happening because over the weeks and the months that you're doing the training, your dog's reaction is getting worse and worse. So that is sensitizing, and we don't want to do that. So we want to reward calm behavior in the presence of the trigger, and we want to do this at a safe distance. And that's part of what counter conditioning and desensitization is about. So you also want to find a qualified professional. And yes, I'm going to go back into methods of training for just a moment here. You want a good trainer who has experience in this kind of work, who has successful cases in this kind of work, and a trainer that you feel comfortable with their methods. If your trainer is doing something to your dog that you don't like, don't use that trainer. Whether you feel the trainer is hurting your dog or whether you feel the trainer is being overly gentle to your dog or soft to your dog, whatever the case may be, if you're not comfortable with that, don't use that trainer. Because, and here's where I'm going to get a little controversial again, if a trainer's hurting your dog, I can guarantee you it's not going to end well for your dog in the training aspect. I will talk more about that in a minute. If your trainer is being particularly soft on your dog, if you are the kind of person who thinks you need a pinch collar, but your trainer's using cookies instead or boiled chicken breast to do the work, then you're probably not going to be comfortable with that trainer, and you're going to be quick to criticize when things are not going right, and maybe even quick to blame the trainer. And I'm not saying this in a mean way at all. I just want you to understand that when you choose to step out of your safety zone or what you perceive is the right way to do this training, if you're not comfortable, your brain is going to go there pretty quickly. Well, I wasn't sure about this anyway. Yeah, I'm just wasting my money here. This person's not doing a good job. When in fact, they may be doing everything correctly, but you're just not well versed and you're not comfortable with the process. So my suggestion, because I am a positive trainer, is to do a little reading about the method that you're about to embark upon before you do it. Make sure you feel comfortable about it. Make sure you understand it. Ask your trainer to explain it to you. How does this method work exactly? And make sure you're feeling good about it before you hire the trainer. Now, I suggest avoiding trainers that use punishment-based methods like shocking and pinch collars because these methods may appear on the surface to fix the problem of reactivity, but they are not always doing that. Mostly, they are suppressing behavior. They are just stopping the outward signs of the reactivity, but they are not addressing the underlying emotions that the dog is having that cause those reactions to happen. And because they're not addressing the underlying emotions, your dog is not really changing the way they feel. They've just been suppressed. Their outward, their shouting, their outward body language, if you will, is being suppressed. So usually when you suppress the behavior, it comes back. It shows up somewhere in some other aspect of the dog's life. And that's why I suggest that you avoid that type of training. And you will see it pop up in dogs. Often, for example, someone will say, oh, I had this fixed. He was great. He doesn't mind dogs anymore. He's totally fine. And then one day he just bit my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, out of the blue. There was no warning. He just suddenly turned around and bit her. And even though she's not clearly a trigger for that dog may develop triggers in other things. Like maybe it was once reactive towards dogs. It no longer appears to be, but now it becomes reactive to people or to young children or to strangers. Or perhaps the dog becomes a resource guarder, starts guarding things. And usually it's not like it just turns them into a resource guarder, but it may, if the dog already has an inclination to be a bit guardy, it may make them worse. It can also produce a frantic dog, a dog that is frantically trying to calm people because usually when people are around, they are shocked or they're yanked on the pinch collar, and dogs are trying to frantically calm everyone down so they don't get hurt. So those are some ways that shock collar or punishment-based training can have an adverse effect on the dog's life or the dog's well-being. Just things to be aware of. And if you still feel that you need to use that method for training, just make sure that you do a little reading, a little research before you go down that road. Make sure you understand the possible fallout from that type of training. So that's why I feel all the major veterinary associations many around the world, and certainly in America, do not promote that type of training for reactivity specifically because the results are too varied. It's not a sure thing because some dogs may show no adverse effects from the training. Other dogs may do one of these things I just talked about. We just don't know. It depends on how the dog responds to the training. But in positive training, it works and there is no fallout. So it makes sense to use that style of training. Any trainer that you work with should be able to give you a personalized training plan. It doesn't need to be a play-by-play, but it needs to be a general idea, a general plan. This is what we're going to do. Here's the management. Here is the training we're going to do. This is the progression. And, this could take weeks or months to do. That's important that a trainer explains that to you or writes a plan out for you so that you understand it. Basic training skills that will help in the actual training itself, teaching look at that or find it or engage, disengage. These are all cues for redirection, and they are fabulous to use in reactivity training. Leave it is a command I also like. I use leave it for everything. Sometimes I tell my dog leave it when I drop something on the kitchen floor. I might use leave it when my dog wants to move towards another dog or towards a person or towards half-eaten pizza on the sidewalk. I'm going to use leave it for all of those things. And I think it's a great command. It's just no, we're not engaging that right now. And it's also important in training to understand the frustration that can happen for some dogs. Frustration can be a driver for reactivity. Some dogs love other dogs, but when they're on leash, they become what we call leash reactive. That just means that the dog doesn't feel like they can make space when they need to make space. So maybe they have a little bit of fear or a little uncertainty about other dogs, but if they feel they can make the space when they need it, then they're feeling good about it because they're in control. But on a leash, they know they're not in control, and that may make them leash reactive because then they're going to go on the offense and they just don't want to meet a dog because they know they can't control it. They can't control the situation. So it's important to understand that aspect. Also, sometimes dogs get frustrated because they want to greet another dog so badly and play with them, and they don't understand that it's just not possible. And that can build a lot of frustration up, and it can trip over and become what looks like reactive behavior. So it's important to understand that when you're going through the training process. And if you're doing the training correctly, and I say this all the time, it should be boring. There should be no fireworks. There should be no frustration and excitement and lunging and barking. If you're doing this training correctly, it's pretty boring. It's almost as boring as watching paint dry on the wall. Really, honestly, that's when you're doing it correctly. One other thing I want to talk about in reactivity with dogs is the emotional toll it takes on you, the owner. It's important that you acknowledge the challenges and frustrations that come along with owning a reactive dog. It can be isolating. It can be embarrassing. You have to deal with judgmental comments from other people sometimes who don't understand what you're going through and what your dog is going through. People are going to say things, and it's going to hurt you sometimes and make you mad. It happens. I had 2 reactive dogs. One of them has since passed away, but that dog that just recently passed away as I'm recording this podcast was a German Shepherd. She was very reactive, and I spent a lot of time training her. She was great around other dogs. But, I know the feeling when people look at you, especially when you have a powerful breed like a German Shepherd or a Doberman or a Pit Bull, a Cane Corso. People look at you and they judge. And when they see your dog being reactive, they really judge. It's hard not to. And some people are afraid of you or afraid of your dog. So it's important to acknowledge those challenges and those frustrations. And I will say one thing about this. This is a big one for me. I never realized really to what degree what intensity I was using this particular behavior, but it's the vigilance. When I lost my German Shepherd a little while ago, I then started walking and working my Chihuahua a lot more. And my Chihuahua was pretty friendly. And when I would take him out, when I first started taking him out and working him and teaching him some sports and doing more things with him, I suddenly realized, wow, I was really vigilant with my German Shepherd. I really was. I never understood how vigilant I was until I didn't have to be vigilant anymore. And I think that's important for people to understand. You have to be vigilant all the time. You're always watching on the horizon. Is there a dog coming? Is there a trigger coming over the horizon that I need to see before my dog sees it? So that's an important thing to accept and understand as well. As an owner of a reactive dog, you should build a support system for yourself. You should connect with other owners of reactive dogs. A great place for this is online on Facebook. With all the negative things about social media, there are some positives, and that is finding a support group for other reactive dog owners. There are some great Facebook pages out there. I think they're fabulous. They offer fabulous support ideas and tips like I am now, and it will just make you feel so much better to know that you're not alone. Find the friends or the family that are in your local area who are understanding as well. That's really important. Even if you just make a general comment, oh, it was such a hard day today. Fido barked at 3 dogs on my walk. Oh, what a struggle today. Just to even say that little comment to somebody in passing and knowing that they're not judging you for it is really important. Practice self-compassion for yourself. Recognize you are doing the best you can with what you have available right now. If you're not in a training plan with a trainer, do the management. It's okay to live with management. You can live for years in management if that's what you have to do. But understand you're doing the best you can. And celebrate those small victories. That's so important. So many times people forget, we take for granted, oh, he did it right. Great. That's wonderful. And then the dog makes a mistake and we put more emphasis on the mistake than we do the good stuff. And I was just talking to my leash walking class the other day about this. We were talking about in leash walking how when your dog is doing it correctly, we sometimes as people, we forget to acknowledge when they're getting it right. But we actually spend more energy trying to prevent them from making mistakes and trying to correct the mistakes by circling them or stopping or redirecting or whatever the case may be. But we don't always put as much energy into acknowledging when it's right. So it's important that you celebrate the small victories. Oh, we saw a trigger from 25 feet, and usually we can't do that without barking, but today we did it. Wow, that was awesome. Or today I successfully blocked my dog and gave him a food scatter behind a vehicle while the trigger went by, and it worked out beautifully. The timing was perfect. Celebrate those little victories. They help, I promise you. Take breaks and prioritize your own well-being once in a while. It's really important that you are occasionally taking time, if you enjoy being out in nature, walking by yourself or with some people, and not always with your reactive dog, because then you don't have to be vigilant. You can just enjoy the nature, you can enjoy the walk, you can relax. It's important to prioritize yourself, okay, once in a while. Find ways to de-stress, even if that means taking a little walk by yourself. Looking into the future when you have a reactive dog, manage expectations. Understand that reactivity may not be cured, but it can be significantly managed, and if you choose, it can be significantly reduced. Understand your dog's limits. You may only get within 10 feet of dogs, and that's the limit for your dog. Maybe you'll just never get any closer. It's okay. Understand that your dog has limits, and that is all right. It's still better than dealing with a barking, lungy dog from 15 feet. So accept your dog's limits and be respectful of those. Focus on the progress, not the perfection. Remember, those small improvements are really important. They go a long way when you're looking at your overall progress, not every little episode. And advocate for your dog. Be their voice. Protect them from an overwhelming situation. It's really important. So as I wind up this podcast, which I know was probably a little long-winded today, and that was me, you guys, being on point. That was not getting on a soapbox or diverging too much. But the key takeaways I want you to remember: you're not alone. There are many dog owners out there who struggle with reactivity. It's not your fault, and it's likely not your dog's fault. And in fact, it's almost never the dog's fault, because they're just being the dog. They're just being who they are. They are fearful. They are insecure. They have anxiety. Whatever the situation may be, your dog may have a health issue that's causing the reactivity. That's not a dog being a bad dog. That is a dog who is dealing with a lot of stuff and is reacting accordingly. Management is crucial. It's crucial for the safety and the training and reducing stress for everyone. Positive reinforcement-based training can make a significant difference, and it actually changes underlying emotions. When you change those, you fix the reactive behavior. Seek a professional who is qualified to do the job, and again, celebrate small victories and be patient with the process. It takes time, you guys, but if you're patient, it works, I promise. All right. Have a great time out there training your dogs, everybody. Take care.